Do you like cats? Would you like to learn how to make multiple flying geese units at a time? Hi there, it's Reed from Blue Bear Quilts. Welcome back to the channel. I'm a QT creative and this is Comfy Cats. It's made with QT Fabric's new line called Quilt Room Kitties, which will be available in May of 2024. So if you like cats and want to learn how to make these flying geese units, stay tuned and keep watching and I'll show you how I made this quilt. To make the Comfy Cats quilt, we need some key ingredients, and the first would be this panel fabric, which has these beautiful cats on it, and it's called Quilt Room Kitties by QT Fabrics, and it was designed by the Morris Creative Group for QT Fabrics. But aren't these cats just adorable? There's something like 16 different cats on this panel, and they're all just beautiful. So you definitely need that panel. Then you're going to need this blue fabric from that same collection, Quilt Room Kitties. It's kind of a mosaic tile pattern in this blue shade. And then you need that same mosaic tile pattern in this orange shade. There's one more fabric that we need from Quilt Room Kitties, and it's this gorgeous one. It's that similar mosaic tile design that has beautiful rust reds and oranges and light oranges and teal and light teal. This is an absolutely gorgeous fabric that's part of the Comfy Cats quilt pattern. And then the final fabric is this tone-on-tone that's still part of the Quilt Room Kitties group or collection. And it's definitely part of the quilt and will be used as the backing as well. Then I'm going to be using Studio 180 Deb Tucker's tools in order to make this quilt, and there's 3 of them that I'm going to be using, and I'll be demonstrating how to use each. The first is the wing clipper, and that's going to help make the flying geese units that are in the quilt. And then I'm also going to use the Deb Tucker Split Rects quilt, which is going to make the half square rectangles that are in the border of the quilt. And then finally, I'm going to use Deb Tucker's Tucker Trimmer 1, which will be used to make the half square triangles that are in the quilt. So those are some key things that you need in order to make this Comfy Cats quilt. So let's get started. The first thing that I need to do is fussy cut out the cat pictures, and sometimes when the fabric comes off the bolt, they may not be perfectly straight, so you'll notice, like, if I line this one up with this one, it's kind of going over that one, so I'm going to try to cut in the middle of these strips and then press these, and I may have to work on trying to get them nice and even before I actually cut out the cats individually. But so the first thing would be just to separate all these cats apart and then iron them so that they're as straight as possible, because I'm literally going to need to cut just outside, 1/8 of an inch outside of each of these pictures. So how do I fussy cut these little cat panel pieces so that they're 7.5 inches, which is what the pattern requires? So I take a ruler like this that is at least 8 inches. This one happens to be 9.5, and on the back I've put some tape to kind of make it sticky on the fabric. And I've determined that in order to get 7.5 on the top and the bottom, I basically have to put the 1/8 inch line at the top of the cat picture, which is going to leave 1/8 of an inch of the white showing, and then to go down to 7.5, it's also going to leave 1/8 of an inch down here. So I line that up first to make sure that I have 1/8 on the top and 1/8 on the bottom. And sometimes if the fabric has been skewed a little bit, you might have to tug on it a little bit. You might also have to iron it so that it's as square as you possibly can get it, because sometimes when these fabrics come off of the printing presses and get wrapped on the cardboard wrappers that they're on, the fabrics get skewed a little bit, but you can usually correct that with ironing and water and kind of trying to pin it into a square. But this one's pretty square. So then the next thing I look at was I determined that if I put 1 2.5 on this side, and then also on the right side from the 7.5 inch line, if I go in 1 2.5, that basically gives me the 7.5 inches around the piece that I need. So that looks pretty good. So I first trim up 2 sides like this, then trim up the top, and then I'm going to take and flip the piece, and now I'm going to line up the 7.5 on this right side with the 7.5 on the bottom. And now you can line it up so that it's exactly, so you want these little lines that are on the ruler to be lined up exactly on the edge, like they're actually kind of covering the edge. They're contained within the fabric, is what I'm trying to say. And so I have like a little more than 1/8 down here on the bottom, a little less than 1/8 on the top. That's fine, that'll all be taken in the 1/4 inch seam when I sew it. And so now I'm going to trim up these final 2 sides and do the top. And there we go. We have a kitty that's all trimmed up, ready to be sewn to the other pieces. This is going to get completely enclosed in the 1/4 inch. Same thing on the bottom here. This looks like it's going to come pretty close to being enclosed in the 1/4 inch. And if for some reason it isn't, this piece is specifically designed so that this same kind of fabric, the white with the taupe in it, is going to be right next to it, so it won't be that noticeable. So that's how I trim up these panel pieces to get them to be 7.5 inches square. Now, in order to make the blocks that are in the Comfy Cats quilt, we need the panel piece that's been fussy cut here, and then we need 2 flying geese units and a 1/2 square triangle unit. The flying geese units are going to be made with the Wing Clipper 2 ruler that looks like this. It's kind of hard to see, but I'll show you when I'm using it better. And the 1/2 square triangle units are going to be made with the Tucker Trimmer 1 ruler, which looks like this. So one thing you'll notice is that the flying geese units have different color sky. So this part is typically considered the goose or the geese, and this part is typically considered the sky, but there are 2 different colors in the sky, and it's very easy to do that with the Wing Clipper ruler. So on this one you'll notice that the teal blue is on the left and the orange mosaic is on the right, and this one the orange mosaic is on the left and the teal blue is on the right. And then in the 1/2 square triangle unit they're all the same, where the teal blue is in this upper left hand corner and the off-white is in the right hand corner. So the first thing that we have to do is we have to cut some fabric pieces and lay them out together to make those flying geese units. And so we take a square of our background fabric. So in the block, the goose is considered the background. And on that, we lay 2 squares of the mosaic orange fabric. And the instructions for the wing clipper tell you what size fabric these need to be cut out. Then we draw a line diagonally from corner to corner on both of these pieces. It can be done with pencil because it's going to be cut and it's not going to show. And then we lay the pieces, both of them at the same time, on the large background square. And you kind of want to nudge them so that they're just about a thread or two from the edge. Like they don't need to go exactly to the edge, they need to come in like basically a thread or two, and that's on both of these. And so this one is laid on top of that one, but you can see that it's one continuous line. Then you bring this to your sewing machine and you sew 1/4 inch on either side of that line. And I use a 1/4 inch foot that has like a little edge, it's a little black edge on it, and I basically run that edge along this line one direction, which puts the 1/4 inch over here, and then I turn it around and run it on the other side of that line and get the 1/4 inch on the other side. And once you've done that, you then take and cut these pieces in half, and you end up with two that look like this. And you take it to your iron and you press it. I'll just finger press this one, but you'll actually do it with your iron. And so you press both of the sky pieces away from the background square. And so you're going to end up with two that look like this. Then once you've done that, so here we have this piece that's been pressed like this. We're now going to take a teal square, and again the wing clipper ruler is going to tell you what size that square needs to be, and we're going to place it on top of that piece we just ironed. And there are two of these, like when we split this in half, we got two of these. So you're going to do this twice, where you take a unit like this and put the teal square on top of it. And again, I've drawn a line from corner to corner and then sewn 1/4 inch on either side of that. And then we're going to take and cut this in half, and I will demonstrate doing that if I can find my ruler here. So we're just going to basically place our ruler right on that line and cut the two sections in half like that. Whoops, there went my rotary cutter. So we end up with one where the orange is on the left and the teal blue is on the right, and the other one, the orange is on the right and the teal blue is on the left. And because you had two units that came from this original piece, you're going to end up with two of these and two of these. And you need one of each of these for a block. So basically this unit is going to create 4 blocks. And so the pressing is done where this is pressed or was pressed away from the white, and once again on this side it's going to be pressed away from the white, and this one will be pressed away from the white. So this is what they look like once they've been pressed. Next, I'm going to show you how you trim up these pieces with the wing clipper ruler. Okay, before I think I called the wing clipper ruler the wing clipper 2, but I'm actually using the wing clipper 1. There is actually a wing clipper 2, but for this particular quilt I'm using wing clipper 1. And I'm left-handed, so if you happen to be right-handed, you would be doing everything the exact opposite of what I'm doing. So for example, I have the wing clipper where it says wing clipper upside down for how I'm going to trim it. And if you were cutting it, you would probably you'd be doing it like this, and the wing clipper would be off to the left if you're right-handed. But I'm left-handed, so I'll be doing it this way. And the wing clipper ruler tells you what the unfinished size of the block needs to be trimmed to. And for me, it's 4 by 7.5. So that's going to finish at 3.5 by 7. And so you basically put the 4-inch line along that right edge and make sure that it's completely within the block. And right here it's a little bit off the orange fabric, so I'm going to move that down just a little bit. And then we want to make sure that these lines are lined up with the seam lines. Now sometimes they're going to be right on and sometimes they're going to be a little bit off. And if they're off, just try to make it equal distant from both sides. Like you'll notice this one may be off just a tiny little bit and this one's off a tiny little bit. And then again, we're looking to make sure that there is fabric that's still all the way around. And then we're going to take and trim up this left side and trim up the top here. Then we're going to take and flip the block 180 degrees, and we're going to put those same lines back. So we don't turn the ruler at all, we just put the same line. So now I'm lining up the 4-inch line exactly on what I just cut. And the same thing with this bottom one, I'm putting it exactly where I just cut. And you'll notice that now a 3.5 little triangle is in that corner again. So I'm just checking and double checking and making sure that everything is getting where it needs to be. So that looks pretty good. Our 4-inch line is along there. Our 7.5-inch line is along there. And we're going to finish trimming up this block. So there it is, all neatly trimmed up. You can see that by creating an oversized block like this and trimming it down, it makes a perfect block. You've got like a perfect 1/4 inch up there. The corners are right where they need to be. And so I'm going to do the exact same thing with this other block. And then we will have the 2 flying geese units that are necessary to make a block. So the other thing that we needed was the 1/2 square triangle unit that was up here in this corner. So to do that, we're using the Tucker Trimmer 1 ruler that looks like this. And again, we're going to be putting 2 squares together. So there's a teal blue square and a white square. We're going to draw a line down the middle with pencil, and then we're going to sew a 1/4 inch on either side. And then we take and we trim right on that line that we've just sewn. We're going to take this to our iron and we're going to press to the teal blue side on both of them. So we end up with 2 of them from 1 set of squares. And then I'm going to take and put the, it actually starts with a 2-inch line, so I'm going to take and put the 2-inch line in the upper left-hand corner. And again, remember, if you are right-handed, you'll be doing this the exact opposite of how I'm doing it. So this is also going to finish at 3.5 inches. So it's the 4-inch line when it's unfinished, and there's a diagonal line that's running right through the middle. And so you trim up this side and this side, then you flip it around 180 degrees, and again line up the 4-inch line there and the 4-inch line there, and trim up these other two sides, and you end up with a perfect half square triangle unit. The corners are right where they belong, and the measurement of this is exactly 4 inches, which is what we want it to be. So now the way these things get sewn together, and one other thing that I want to point out is that all the blocks are exactly the same. So in other words, we have this one that's already been sewn with these half square triangles in the upper left hand corner, but then this block, the way it actually gets laid in the quilt, those half square triangle units are in the lower right hand corner. So if we rotate this, you can see it looks just like this one. The only problem is the cat needs to be sewn in upside down. So you have to pay attention to the orientation of these units connected with the panel piece in order to get it correct for the placement in the quilt, if that makes sense. So in other words, they're all sewn the same. They all look exactly like this. The only thing is, if you're going to do them all exactly like the first one in the pattern, you're going to have to put some of the pieces upside down. Some of them are going to have to be going to the right side. Some are going to be going to the left side. So you do have to pay attention to the orientation of the panel piece and how that particular block gets set in the quilt. So when we have these two pieces together, we take the flying geese unit with the blue, the teal blue on the right, next to this one. So notice the orientation of those pieces. This gets laid on there, sewn 1/4 inch. It gets pressed towards the half square triangle. This one, we do it this way, and we press towards the panel piece. And so it gets laid out like this. And then we flip this up like this. And because of the way we pressed it, these two seams are going to nest with each other. So you can see that one's going that way, and this one's going the opposite direction. So you nest those together. And then one other thing I do to make sure we get those perfect points is I take and I put a pin where this point comes out, and I put another pin where this point is, and then before I start sewing, I actually have that pinned so that I know that my needle needs to go right over where that pin is going in order to get a perfect point. So when you've done that, it ends up looking like this. And so there is a block, and so for this particular cat in the panel and where he is in the quilt, this is where these flying geese units need to be. So I'm going to keep sewing these blocks together, and then I'll show you how I lay them out with the sashing pieces. I need to cut some cornerstones that go in between the sashing out of this orange mosaic fabric. And I'm going to use the Creative Grids Stripology ruler to do those and make quick work of it. So there are lines on the bottom of the ruler and lines at the top of the ruler, and you just make sure that those match up. And then in order to cut 2.5 inch strips, you look for the squares on the bottom, and then you want to take your rotary cutter and make sure that it has a lot of the blade exposed. And I'm going to put this in one of the keyholes right here. There's little keyholes, and you just fit your blade right in there. Hold the ruler down nice and tight and just cut right like that. And then to get 2.5 inches, you go over to the next square and make that cut, and go over to the next square and make that cut. And I happen to need 2 of these, I believe. Nope, I need 3. So far I've done 1, 2, this one will be the 3rd one. Okay. Then what we can do is we flip them the other direction, and we can cut them that way as well. And it looks like I missed a little bit right here. There we go. Now we're going to take and turn them this way, and we'll put the ruler back on it. So we're going to go like this, line this up like that, line this up like this, and this like this, and we'll put the ruler back on. We only needed 2 strips because we're going to be able to get 4 cuts this way, which there's 4 layers, so that's going to be 16 out of this strip and 16 out of this strip, which will give us the 32 that we need. So you just make sure that the lines up here at the top are lined up with a line on the ruler, and the same thing with down here, the lines on the bottom are lined up with a ruler, and we've got our strips perpendicular to these lines on the ruler. So here we go, we're going to make the first cut, and there's 1, 2, 3, and 4. And so we have 1, 2, 3, 4 times 4 is 16, and then 16 down here on the bottom, and so those are the 32 that we need for the quilt. So you can see how quick that was to cut out those squares with the Creative Grids Stripology squared ruler. So in order to cut the pieces for the split rectangles in the border, we're using the Deb Tucker's split rectangle ruler, and the ruler tells you for a 4x8 finished split rectangle, which is what we're doing, that we need to cut strips 9 inches. So this strip is 9 inches wide. Then the next thing is we have to lay the ruler with this diagonal edge, and I'm left-handed, so if you're right-handed, everything you do would be the exact opposite of me. And we put this 4x8 line along the right edge here, and then this line that says place along the cut edge of the strip, so we would move that down like this, and then you notice there's a blunt edge over here, so you line up that blunt edge, you line up this black line on the edge of the strip, and then this on the right hand side. That looks pretty good. And then we take and cut right along there like that. And for some reason, my rotary cutter is not cutting through the fabric. I don't understand why. But there, I think we finally got it. So you end up with mirror image pieces that look like this, because we had the fabric strip with the fabrics wrong side together. And I need 8 of these pieces. So now we have to scooch this down. We're going to see if we can get that lined up again. These create oversized pieces, so it's okay if it's off a little bit, but we want it to basically be lined up. That looks pretty good. So now we're going to take the ruler and flip it the other direction. And there's a line here that says second trim guideline, and then there's another little blunt thing there that says second trim. So we place that up there on the right hand side, and we place this line along the bottom edge here. And when we get that lined up and that lined up, we make our straight cut right along here like this. And again, it did not cut all the way through. I must have nicked this blade or something. There we go. So we end up with more pieces that are mirror image, just like that. Then we're going to now take and reverse the ruler again. Get these pieces all lined up. And so the 4x8 line goes there, this cut edge of the strip line goes there, the blunt edge goes on the left edge. We get all of that lined up, and we make this cut. I'm going to cut it more than once because I don't know why it's having so much trouble. And it still didn't get it. I'm going to have to put a new blade, I guess. And I can't believe that because I just put a new one in. There we go. So we have two more mirror image pieces. And we need a total of 8. So far I have 6, so I need one more set. We're going to take and pull this down here like this. Take and get that all straightened out. Again, flip the ruler the other direction, and again we want this line to be along the cut line, and this second trim line to be on the right hand edge here, and the edge of the ruler to be along the left edge. That looks pretty good, and I'm going to cut right along there. I'm going to do this several times. And it still did not get one. There we go. And so we have our 8 mirror image pieces that we need to create our split rectangles. And I'll be showing you how I sew those together. So we have our 2 half rectangle pieces that have been cut, and they both are ones that were going the same direction. And they get laid together like this, and so then when you put them together there should be like a little point sticking out on both ends. And when you press that open, when you press it, we press towards the dark side, it looks like this, and it's actually oversized at this point. So then we're going to take our split rec ruler, and we're going to look for this finished unit line, and you can either use that line, or on the mirror blocks you use the second trim line, but for this one we use the 4x8, which is the size of our unit finished line, and we have to make sure that we're within the 4.5 inches here and the 8.5 inches down here on the bottom. So you just slide the ruler until you get it completely within that 4.5 by 8.5 size, and then put your fingers out here so that they're on the right side to hold the ruler in place, and trim off this left edge. And if you were right-handed, you'd be trimming off the right edge like that. Then we take and flip this piece 180 degrees, and we're again going to take and put that 4x8 finished line along the seam line, and this time we're going to line up the 4.5 edge and the 8.5 inch edge on the bottom and this corner right there, so we get it perfectly lined up with the previous cut lines, and we still want our diagonal line going right along that seam. And then we trim off the other two sides. And so that is 1/2 of the mirror image units. Then the other two mirror image units were sewn together like that. And you end up with a unit that looks like that when you sew them together. So that's how these split rectangle pieces are sewn for the border. Now that we have the blocks all sewn together, it's necessary to add the sashing. And on some of the blocks, they're just going to have a piece of sashing on the right-hand side, and for the ones that are on the left, they're going to have a sashing on the left side as well. And then 4 of the blocks are going to have this orange mosaic sashing instead of the white sashing. So then these units will get sewn together in pairs. And the pairs will get sewn into rows. And then there also is rows of sashing that go in between the rows. And one of those rows is going to look like this, with the orange mosaic separated by orange squares. And then the other 4 rows of sashing are going to look like this, where it has white separated by the orange squares. And then, of course, we have orange mosaic, which is going to be our inner border. And then we have our outer border, which is going to be comprised of the white with half square triangles at the top of it, and also these angled pieces that are pointing away from the quilt. So I'm going to continue sewing the sashing together, and then I will lay out the rows and show you what that looks like. Now we have all of the blocks sewn in rows, and we have the sashing in between the blocks. You can see that we have a sashing row with the orange cornerstones in between the rows, and it's now been sewn onto the bottom of the row above it. The center sashing row is this orange mosaic fabric. It's the center one both horizontally and vertically. And next I'm going to sew all of these rows together, and then we will sew the inner and outer border on after that. Now I have the inner mosaic border sewn on the quilt, and I'm getting ready to sew the outer pieced border that has the half rectangles. And so you can see that the sides go on first, and then the bottoms have these pieced corners, and then on all 4 sides are these 2 pieced half rectangle squares. So they get sewn together, the extra fabric on either side gets sewn together, the sides get put on first, and then the top will get put on that has these corner pieced pieces as well. So I'm going to sew those borders on now, and then the next thing will be getting the quilt quilted by a long armer, and then I will show you the quilt when it's all done. So that's it. We made a comfy cat's quilt using QT Fabric's new line called Quilt Room Kitties. Remember, it's going to be available in May of 2024. I hope you've enjoyed this video, And if you have, be sure to subscribe to the channel, give it a thumbs up, and be sure to hit that bell so that you'll be notified when I post future videos. So long for now, and we'll see you next time. Happy quilting. Bye-bye.